Hi guys, it's Debbie. Now, although many of you have been asking, I haven't seen Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk yet. Nolan is my favourite director. Behind me you can see my poster of Interstellar, which is my favourite film ever and which I consider Nolan's absolute masterpiece. So it's obviously very hard for me knowing that I'll have to wait still a few weeks before I can actually buy a ticket to go and see Dunkirk. As many other Christopher Nolan films, the soundtrack to Dunkirk was created by Hans Zimmer. And although I can't do anything during the wait for Dunkirk except for listening to Hans Zimmer's recently released soundtrack for this film, I actually went to see Hans Zimmer live in concert last month. I obviously wasn't able to hear anything from Dunkirk as the concert was way before the film was released, but if you have the chance and you take the tickets now, you'll probably be able to hear them play something from that soundtrack. So although I unfortunately can't speak about Dunkirk yet, I would like to share with you some of my memories from that wonderful moment. The venue was in Milan, a couple of hours from where I live, so we travelled by train and booked a hotel close by. Now, although I'm describing a typical summer day in Italy, which normally would be scorching hot with a desert-like climate, it was actually oddly absolutely freezing. It rained all day and there was also a very cold wind. So when we reached the venue, it was absolutely pouring with rain. So wherever we went, there were just crowds of people trying to shelter from the nasty weather. So we entered the stadium/arena around 2 hours earlier, although we had assigned seats, so there wouldn't have been the problem of finding a place. Also, because of this weather, I wasn't sure whether to bring my camera, even because umbrellas weren't allowed at the venue because of recently enhanced safety measures. And being a naturally anxious person, I'd actually googled what items weren't allowed at the concert, and the list actually included cameras. So I unfortunately had to leave my camera in the hotel, and all the footage I'll be showing you today will be in a worse quality than this because it was filmed on our phones. During the long wait before the concert, I reached crazy fan levels and spent some time at the merchandise stand where I actually bought a t-shirt, which is this one, with a purple Hans Zimmer and the band on the front and the list of events and dates on the back. Milan is down here at the bottom because it was the last date of the European tour. After a 2-hour wait, the lights finally went off and Hans Zimmer walked on stage, and then right after him, other members of the band joined him one by one. And then at that point we realised we hadn't noticed that the stage was oddly small. There weren't enough instruments, and in general there wasn't enough space for the complete band. But as the members kept on playing a medley of various pieces, different curtains lifted up behind Zimmer, revealing the rest of the band. So first a line of percussions, including famous drummer Satnam Rangotra, and then the strings and the chorus. After the first medley, Zimmer stopped to greet everybody, and then he started the actual show with his first piece, which was from the soundtrack of Crimson Tide. Now, I have to admit, I've never seen this movie, so I obviously couldn't recognise the piece, but there was so much energy in it, just like every single piece that was played that night, that I enjoyed listening to it anyway. The show went on with various wonderful pieces from The Gladiator, Pirates of the Caribbean, The Da Vinci Code, and many more. And then during the break for applause between one piece and the next, we abruptly stopped in our tracks because we suddenly recognised a familiar call, as Le Bohème, the original voice behind the Lion King soundtrack, stepped on stage singing along with his daughter. So we actually got to see and listen to the authentic voice behind the Lion King soundtrack.
Yeah.
piece and the other, Zimmer would actually stop to introduce the various members of his band, explain what instrument they played, where they were from, and so on. For example, he introduced Tina Guo, which he explained had been playing since the age of 3, and he stressed the importance of maintaining that childhood playfulness in the creation of music, never losing that feeling of discovering sounds, underlining that the important goal is not necessarily of becoming a professional musician, but actually just of playing music. I really appreciated the attention Zimmer gave to all the members of the band, not focusing the attention all on himself, but also explaining the origins of his music and pointing out what sounds or musicians that he recommended listening out for in certain pieces. Then as the show moved on, we listened to the soundtrack to Wonder Woman, and then one of the most powerful pieces of the evening, which was from Dark Knight theme. Now, I've seen Marilyn Manson screaming at the top of his lungs from the front rows at a concert. I've listened to every variation of rock and metal you can imagine, but from that piece onwards, Hans Zimmer's music was more powerful than any rock concert ever. Thousands and thousands of people, the whole crowd was completely still and silent, and the metal structure around us was trembling from the vibrations that were produced from these musicians. The power and the rich sound that these artists were creating was absolutely beyond belief. It was the most professional, well organized and powerful music event I've ever attended. And after playing the theme from Dark Knight, Hans Zimmer stopped to speak about one of his greatest work partners, which is Christopher Nolan, and actor Heath Ledger, which portrayed Joker in Nolan's Dark Knight, and which unfortunately died shortly after. He told us about the piercing pain in hearing about Heath's death, of how a loss like that leaves an irreparable hole in your soul. And he also told us of how he had so much anger in his heart at the time that he just wanted to change the soundtrack completely, remove all that rusty, grungy feeling the pieces have, and create something more pure and clean as a tribute to his deceased friend. And then of how after he had reflected about this and realised that the best tribute he could ever give to his friend was that of leaving the pieces just like he had created them, just how Heath had created them, and how he would have liked them to remain. Obviously by then I was in tears, but I was even more when Hans Zimmer then sat down and started playing the notes to the soundtrack of Interstellar. Now, I'm not a music connoisseur. I wouldn't be able with all my willpower to tell you what one note is or play the simplest of songs, but listening to that piece just made me realise how much his music means to me, and how I could just simply close my eyes and without hesitation pinpoint a specific sound from that piece and connect it to a specific moment in the film. This is the power of filmmaking and of music combined. After Interstellar, the concert seemed to have ended, my eyes were swollen like peaches and I was sobbing my way down the steps ready to go back home. But then Hans Zimmer came back on stage, sat down and played Time, the ending piece from Inception, making that the best concert ever and one of the best evenings. During that last piece, most of the crowd has actually started to move towards the exits. Most of us were collecting our personal items ready to leave the venue, so it was a rather chaotic moment. But as soon as Hans Zimmer put his hands in front of the keys, the whole crowd, so thousands of people, went immediately silent. There was not one cough, not a rustle. We could actually hear the creaking of the wood as the musicians moved around on stage. It was one of the most respectful and mesmerizing moments I'd ever taken part in. If you have the chance, I would definitely recommend watching a Hans Zimmer concert. Tickets can be on the pricey side, but they are worth every single penny, as everything is well organized, looked after, and it is also quite a lengthy concert because, for example, ours started at 9 PM and finished well over midnight, allowing just a small break halfway through. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe for more movie related content and much more. See you soon. Bye.